Hey guys! Okay, so I'm climbing aboard. Alright, so we have The House of Eve. We're going to review this, and this is by Sadeqa Johnson. I've been telling you guys about her in the book of Yellow Wife that came out about 2 years ago. So, definitely, or was it a year ago? I think it was a year ago. Yeah. So, I definitely wanted to read this one because, it was such a good book. Mary Lumpkin, right? And then she tells a lot of stories from the perspective of colorism and the Black experience. And I think she's found her niche there with trying to really convey what history must have been like for different shades of Black people. And that I found, that I like about her. So when I saw, after I read Yellow Wife, I was like, okay, what else did she write? And then I found The House of Eve was coming out. And then I found like reviews, and I do agree with it. So, spoiler alert, we are going to go into a little bit more detail here than we did in, some previous books. I am going to tell you what's going on with it. So, if you don't want to know, read the book, come on back, or get my perspective while you're reading. Find out what's going on and let me know. Okay, so you gotta give her a little credit. This actually hit the best times list for New York Times bestsellers list because we've got Reese Witherspoon up here certifying it as a book club selection. And of course, once any celebrity of any well-known, stature, co-signs on a book, it's like immediately a bestseller. So would I have said that one was a bestseller over Yellow Wife? I don't know. So let's go into it. All right, so we have the 1950s, early 1950s, because it really kind of took place in 1948. And you have two women, young women, Ruby Pearsall. She's in the We Rise program. She's a high schooler. She's just got a lot going on with her life, and we can all kind of feel for her because we know about generational issues, right? So for her family is in this generational of not going to school, not finishing college, working a deadbeat job just to kind of make ends meet, and not really succeeding or becoming their full potential because they end up getting pregnant. And the pregnancy, as we all know, even as parents, even if you're married, right? Once you have children, it's difficult. It's difficult to then pursue your dream if you haven't pursued it already. And I think that's why a lot of young people nowadays, the millennials, the Gen Zers, they are waiting, Gen Xers too, I think, they are waiting until they have their career, they have their house, they want to travel, they want to do things before they have children. Like the U.S. population of birth rates in the United States is considerably low even up to a decade ago. That's how the mindset of the younger generations, I'd say probably 1990 and on, birth 1990, those that were born 1990 and on, they kind of have that philosophy like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to have kids right now. And I totally get that because when you have children, it's a change. You are not responsible for yourself when you have children anymore. You are responsible for a little being that you have to raise and show the right way, and it is about them achieving their goals so that they're becoming productive citizens. And not like you just don't count anymore, but it's a change, it's a shift. It's not just about you, So my mother had two sisters. She was the only one that had a child, only had one child, me. And I saw, the difference between, my aunts going on vacation all the time and, going out of the country, and and buying for themselves. And it was totally different when, you have a child that you have, your child needs school clothes, school starting, your child needs, medical care. It's not so easy to just flip, and so we have Ruby in this situation where she will be the only person in her family to ever go to college and to finish high school. She's in a We Rise program, and she has to maintain a certain GPA. And her focus is razor sharp. No matter what happens, she is determined to be the first person in her family to go to college. She has a grandmother that has lost her sight due to medical issues, and so her goal is to become an optometrist and to help her grandmother receive the gift back of sight. And she says even if she can't do that for her grandmother, like maybe she can help other people. And then you have Eleanor. And so Eleanor's already in college, right? Eleanor Quarles is in college already. And she is working for the library, and she is an archivist. So she works with the head librarian archiving all of these interesting Black artifacts, because Eleanor goes to an HBCU, which is an historically Black college or university. I'm going to make sure because I forgot which university she went to. So we go into that part of it, and then it's Howard. Duh. Okay, so it's Howard University, okay, in Washington, D.C. And she comes from not a working class family, okay? So working class family that's working to put her through college. Her father, Elyria, Ohio she's from, and her father works for a factory, and her mother is baking, in order to make ends meet so that they can send Eleanor to college. And Eleanor is doing really well in college, but she is struggling to, with the work study. She has to get another job. And I say that it took me, into half of the book before I was like, why is this called The House of Eve? And clearly on the front of the page, you can see on the front cover, I think this is Eleanor, who they're depicting. And this is the second book that she's written, Sadeqa, that she's had just the lady, not the face, but just the body on the cover. So it goes into Ruby meets Shimmy, which is a Jewish boy whose parents own the apartment building that her aunt and her stay in. And she gets kicked out of her mother's house because she kisses her mother's boyfriend for bus fare. Yeah, it happened. So every week she goes and she takes care of her grandmother and Fatty, who's her other aunt. And Fatty usually works another job and comes home late. So by the time that she ends up getting out of taking care of Nene, which is her grandmother, and getting across town to go to school, she's always late. So she's threatened that if she gets late one more time, she's going to get kicked out of the program. Her grades are up there. She's doing great. She just has trouble being on time because Fatty's relieving her of taking care of Nene too late. So she goes home, and her mother usually leaves her money for bus fare, but apparently it was short that day by some change. And so the mother's boyfriend, Leap, he comes in and she asks him for the bus fare, and he's like, I'll give it to you if you give me a kiss. And so she's like, just a kiss on the cheek, and he's like, just a kiss on the lips. And so she kisses him, and he turns it into this big tongue kiss. Her mother walks in, catches her, and throws her out of the house. And for the entire rest of the story, her mother doesn't let her back in. Then, while living with Aunt Marie at the house, she gets involved with Shimmy, who's a Jewish boy. The Shapiros own the apartment building. And she begins a relationship with him in which she becomes pregnant. And so, funny thing happens, right? I am going through the entire book with you guys, and I finally get done, and I go and check it, and my battery has died. And so I went through the whole entire story, and I was like, whoa, you caught none of it. So I guess that was like my rough draft of trying to, I don't know, like these videos for me, I'm trying so hard. I just don't know. Okay, so Ruby gets pregnant by Shimmy, and then goes through, I'm going to let you guys read that one for yourself, goes through some ways to try to figure out what she's going to do with the child. And she ultimately decides that she's going to go to a home for unwed mothers to have the baby and basically give the baby up for adoption. And this suggestion was from Mrs. Shapiro, which is Shimmy's mom. And then you find out how much power, Mrs. Shapiro actually has, aside from just owning an apartment building, is that she's on the board of the school that Ruby goes to. And so she tells her that if you stay away from Shimmy, get rid of this baby, have no contact with him whatsoever, ever again, I will make sure of it that you get your scholarship and are able to go to school. And Shimmy drops Ruby off at this home. It's the House of the Magdalene. And I'm going to make sure of that for you guys. And she says, he says, I love you. We can still try to do this together. You don't have to have this baby alone. We can go over to the West where it's allowed to have children, where you can have, legal marriages. And we can figure this out together. And she said, you know what? It's like love. I love you too, but love isn't enough. And love isn't going to get me to where I need to be. And so she makes that decision to end up having, taking away his baby and giving it up for adoption. Now, at the same time, Eleanor ends up having a miscarriage. Again. So she ends up having a total of 2 miscarriages while she's married. And the doctor comes in and tells her, hey, this is your 3rd miscarriage. If you have another one, you're going to end up, probably dying from it. And William is like, what? Like, whoa, you said 2. How's it 3? So then her secret past comes up that she actually got pregnant in high school, ended up losing the baby. And so she has some kind of medical condition where she can't, basically, her womb won't hold a child to full term. And it causes strain in the marriage. And through a series of events, she decides that she's going to go to this house of, the Magdalene and the home for unwed mothers, and she's going to adopt a baby. And her and the mother-in-law conspire to use a pillow in order to keep her pregnant, have her not go to certain appearances, and basically at the last event that she goes to, social gathering, they tell everyone that she's sick and she's going to need bed rest for the rest of the pregnancy. And so at the same time that Ruby is supposed to have her child, she's supposed to go into labor. But there's a catch. Ruby's child was not initially Eleanor's. It was Loretta's. And Loretta had a child in the same home, and the child ended up having a lazy eye. So therefore, the baby was considered disabled and not wanted. And so therefore, they are going to put this baby in an orphanage, and they induced labor with Ruby by 2 weeks in order to line up with the time period that Eleanor was supposed to have her baby. And so it ends up being a girl with green eyes like Shimmy, very fair, fairer than Eleanor. And and they accept that child as their own, and no one knows the real truth that the child is adopted. And I just, with that, it just came with me like, it kind of went down to what people had said for the yellow wife, is that you find information, she never gives you closure. For this is the second book that I've read of hers, and it was not, you're left with these carrots dangling that you have no answer for, and you'll never get an answer for because she didn't tell you. And it's not, when you have, like, for instance, like the prince marries the princess and they wander into the sunset, you know they're going to the castle, they're going to have their baby, and they're going to just live a great life. With this story, at the end, you know, it fast forwards to 13 years later. Everybody's achieved everything that they're going to achieve, right? So Phoebe, sorry, not Phoebe, but Eleanor ends up, you know, becoming a really, like, renowned archivist for the library. She graduates college. Her husband William, he finishes his internship, and now he's a part of like residency. He's in charge of a department. And Ruby ends up, you know, going through school and college, and she becomes the optometrist that she always wanted to be. And that part of it is closed, but then what happens to the child? So they're supposed to go out to lunch. Eleanor is supposed to take Willa, which is what they called her, Wilhelmina, but Ruby called her Grace, and she's going to take Wilhelmina to lunch with the dad at the hospital. And Wilhelmina comes downstairs and she's like, you know, this dress doesn't fit me, I feel so awkward, and you know, how am I so like voluptuous, mom, and you know, you're so small and itty bitty, and you know, and look at me. And so she says, I don't want to go, tell dad I'm sick, I'm not going. And when Eleanor goes to the hospital, she meets Ruby, and she says that when they shook hands, she felt like a strange feeling, almost like she didn't want to let go. And William asked Ruby, did she want to go out to lunch with them since the daughter didn't go? And Ruby says, no, you know, I need to get settled. But then she stops and looks above his desk at a painting, and she's really like taken aback by it. And he says, yeah, that's our daughter, she's like quite the artist. And Phoebe, sorry, why I keep saying Phoebe? Because they mentioned Phoebe in the book, so I'm gonna tell you that part. But so then Ruby says, no, you know, I need to get settled in. And then the end. And it's like all of them are keeping this secret, and that is where especially like a lot in families in deep dark history, especially in those years, was really keen on doing that kind of stuff, where you would have a child. In Ruby's case, she didn't even know that her mother was her mother until she was 8 years old. She thought her grandmother was her mother, and that wasn't all too uncommon for people to do, because Sadeqa mentions at the back of the book that that's what happened to her grandmother. Is that, you know, when she had her mother, they didn't tell her mother for 8 years until she was in the 3rd grade. And that is common back in those days. Now you have Ruby, who went to great lengths to achieve her career and her dreams, but she left this child not knowing who they are in the world. And that bothered me. That they would all cover it up. William covered it up, for instance, when Wilhelmina talked to Eleanor about, you know, her body type, and Eleanor said, you know, hey, it's just like your green eyes, you know, they came from, you know, a couple of generations back. No, they didn't. They came because you're actually somebody else's child. And that part of it didn't sit well with me, that this child is going to go on her entire life. Not only did the mother-in-law, but the father and the mother are hiding it. And then Ruby was so focused on school that, and becoming something with her life that, you know, you're only left to feel like she didn't care. Like it was all about her because the author never made it more than that, except for the moment that, she was nursing her the 5 days before she gave her up for adoption. Um, at one of the chapters, it says that she had to do what Mother Margaret told her to do, which was to forget, to act like it never happened. You took a child from Shimmy, you took a child from yourself, and you just went forward as though it never happened. And then it then became like possible to really feel sorry for her because you made a calculated decision. The situation that got you in this from the first place was when you kissed your mother's boyfriend for change, and then you manipulated that situation and then decided to sleep with someone knowing what you had gone through, with your mother had gone through. You put yourself in a position where you got pregnant and then gave up that child and then wandered off like nothing had ever happened. And while you can feel sorry for her in the moment of what she's going through and having to make the decision, and it's heart-wrenching, and she's at the group home, the home for unwed mothers, and that on the other hand is very dramatic and traumatic. You still in some way don't have a sense of feeling sorry for her because she really just concentrated on herself. And then Eleanor, in that same token, was concentrated on herself. She knew she at one point she says in the book that she was damaged goods because she couldn't have children. And it wasn't that part of having an issue wrong with you that was dishonest. It was the fact that you didn't tell your husband before you married him that you had possibly an issue with being able to carry a child full term, or that you had not been a virgin when he met you. And so therefore he's learning off the cuff that that you do have issues being able to carry a child to full term, or even after they lost the first child together. She never said a word. And I think that was because she was trying to fit in. Just try. He was well off. He came from a good family. And she really wasn't going to let that go. Like he was in graduate school for, to become a doctor. His parents helped them out, purchase their first home a year after they got married. I mean, they looked out for each other. They were invited to all the social events of the season. They were well to do. And I don't think she was going to give that up. And so her and Rose, which is William's mother, conspired to have a child, not their own, and to basically pass it off as one of their own. And that part didn't sit well with me at all. I had so much more to say about this book, but I have been talking about this book honestly for over an hour between my lost footage and re-talking about it again. It's crazy. I just really would like to know your opinion about what you guys think of it. And there's a couple other novels that Sadeqa has written, and I don't know. I just don't know if I'm gonna go there again, because it's like, if that's a theme with her where you don't get closure, and the only reason it did go to the Times bestseller was because Reese Witherspoon made it a book club selection. I don't know if I would have read it otherwise. I would have read it I would have read it because of the Yellow Wife. And then when I did hear, and like I said, I look into things afterwards. So when I was looking at the reviews for the House of Eve, it was like you kind of left the story excuse me, incomplete. And I thought that for like a second. I was like, maybe she did do that with this one. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to read it myself and form my own opinion about it. And true to what that other, reviewer wrote, it is along those lines. And because of that, I feel a little let down by the book. I do. Would I read it again? yeah, it was an interesting take on some stuff. It did feel like there were some parts where Ruby was at the House of Unwed Mothers where it could have just condensed then, and I think that she added more to it. There was a part where they brought in one of the guys that was fixing the nursery. It was one guy that would come and work on the nursery, and it kind of hinted that it was going to go in a way where they might have an affair because William was just always not home doing his residency while he was, he was doing his residency after his degree. And so he was never home. And Eleanor was alone with this guy, and William walks in on it, and um, he's like, you shouldn't have been alone with him. So it kind of hinted at, like, would there have been infidelity if William hadn't walked in on them, because she was feeling very lonely and she was having to pretend that she was, pregnant. But then at the same time, she couldn't let him know that she wasn't pregnant. So she had to keep the facade of wearing this pillow for the entire rest of her pregnancy after she lost the second baby. So nobody in the community would know that she had had a miscarriage. And so there are just parts of it that I thought could have kind of condensed the book from being a 362 page read. I mean, it was long. It was long. I do think it was a good baby. I mean, a good book. And I don't know. I would read it again. But I would say to you guys, when you read it, you will find things that you kind of disagree with. And maybe you'll find more sympathy for the protagonists than I did. It's at the end, I just felt like wealth and social stature and careers really trumped everything else. I didn't feel like Ruby gave the baby away because she would have had a better life. I felt like she gave her away so she could have a better life. Yeah, and that's a big difference. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. But I'm glad you guys watched in, and we'll see you on the next one. Maybe you can drop down in the comments which book you'd like me to read next.